All right, I think I'm recording. Yes, I'm recording. Let's go here. Oops. Back to here. Make sure. I'm recording. Okay, cool. We'll edit that out. Hello, thank you so much for joining us for this 2021 conference and this virtual conference that Cosmos put together. My name is Dr. Mike Natali. I am the Department Chair for Shorter University. Dr. Heath Hooper also assisted. He is the Dean of the Ledbetter College of Business, and Mr. Michael Ross, Professor Michael Ross, also assisted with this. So we wanted to talk about what we found through an historical analysis on the gender inequality in collegiate athletics and some of the implications here for women leaders. And so we want to talk about the key literature references that we'll be using. We want to make sure that we have an understanding of what the RGRC is, or the Race, Gender, and Report Card are. And we'll look at the purpose, we'll look at the methodology or the historical analysis that we use. We'll look at definitely some of the results from the past reports. We'll also, obviously, we'll have a discussion. We'll look at some key takeaways. There's about 6 or 7 here, and then we'll also end with some references and also obviously how to get in touch. So without further ado, let's get into the key literature references. And so most of this has come from, in fact, all of this has come from the TIDES report. The TIDES is what it stands for, the Institute for Diversity and Ethics in Sport. This is an annual report that they do, and Division I FBS College Leadership Racial and Gender Report Cards is specifically what we were looking for. And what we've dived into and on this level. So 2018 to 19, 19, 20, 2021 are the reports, and the 21 report just was published. So what's about the Racial and Gender Report Card? Well, it is the definitive assessment of hiring practices of women and people of color in most of the leading professional and amateur sports and sporting organizations within the United States. The report considers the composition assessed by racial and gender makeup of players, coaches, and front office athletic departments, employees in our country's leading sport organizations, including the NBA, NFL, NBA, MLS, WNBA, of course, as well as collegiate athletics departments. So what's the purpose of this presentation? It's twofold. Identify the gender inequality in athletics and within the leadership position specifically at the NCAA Division I FBS level. Okay? We'll look at that, see what the gaps are. Number 2, identify and suggest changes for improvement for women to hold NCAA athletic leadership positions. The methods that we use are going to be collegiate athletic leadership that is still dominated by white males. That's the historical analysis that we're going to uncover. We'll understand, we'll have some data that backs that up. And that through that, we realize, we understand that gender hiring practices can and really need to be improved. We'll suggest a few ways on how to do that. First, I wanted to talk a little bit more about and provide you with some context for the interpretation of the data that we're going to be seeing in a few slides that will be disseminated in just a few minutes. And that is the grading scale. The TIDES incorporated this, the TIDES group has incorporated this in, I think, 2017 or 16, and they've been using it ever since. And so basically the following chart here shows that the gender grading scale, to get an A for a gender, the category needs to be a 45% or above. That is 45% of the people holding the position of leadership, and we'll get into the positions of leadership and their definitions in just a second. But those percentage of people holding those positions need to be made up. 45% of it needs to be made up of women. And so, without further ado, let's take a look at how Tides determines what the leadership position is within their reports. And so that is presidents of schools, again, the schools of the Division I FBS schools, athletic directors, and then FARs. We'll get all three of those, and we're going to look at some comparisons as well. Want to provide additional context of a historical analysis that leading up to 2016, and that is from 2012 to 2016, FBS schools averaged a gender grade of F. Okay, so that is, they were way below the 45. Don't even talk about the A range. They were below 24% for hiring practices in leadership positions. Okay, all across the board, all three of those distinctions, they received a grade of F on average from 2012 to 2016. Because of that, in September of 2016, the NCAA adopted the pledge and commitment to promoting diversity and gender equity in collegiate athletics, which was a great step in the right direction. And as of July 18, 2018, 862 schools and 102 conferences actually signed this pledge. Fantastic, right? We're making progress. However, the pledge is not binding, and there are no sanctions. There's no accountability for not improving for the hiring record of the university athletic department, or on the basis of the president as well. So this is just a save face, if you will. It was a good initiative, a good movement, but no one really kept them accountable for these sort of things. And so this is the pledge itself. So I'll just leave that there for just a second so you guys can read it. You're welcome to pause and get some water. Right. Okay. So the pledge is good, and we'll bring this back into play in a later slide about in terms of a timeline. But let's get into some of the results from the gender report cards. So let's start with the first year, 2018-19. They surveyed 130 presidents, and they got an F in 2018-19. So 16.9%. This was up from the previous year, up to not up 16.9, but up to a 16.9%, which falls below the grading scale of 24%, therefore an F. And so they did the same thing with athletic directors, 130, and again an F. Again, up from the previous year. We didn't really look too deep into the 2017 year. We focused mainly in the last 3 to 4 years. Okay, so we wanted to look at athletic directors specifically, and then we saw that the presidents were also an issue, and then we also looked at the FAR, and we started uncovering a little bit more. And even though, again, it was up from the previous year, we were looking at they're at 9.2. So 9.2% of all athletic directors of the 130 that they surveyed were held by women. FAR, it's significantly higher, 31%, and they get a grade of C. 2019 to 20 results, same thing. Got an F. This time it was down from 16% to 13%. Athletic directors, same thing, from 9% down to 6%. And FAR, interestingly, they were hired more. It was 136 respondents. This time it was 140, or maybe just 3 or 4 others participated in the survey. But they got a B plus, so they were actually trending up from a 31% to 35%. So they're inching closer. So they're doing some good things within the FAR. All right, let's take a look at the most recent report. Same thing, 130 presidents, Still got an F, right? It's up from the previous year, as we saw, but it's at 17.7%, below the threshold of 24% to even get above an F. Athletic directors in equals 30, 130, again, same thing. This time we're matching 2018's year. So we're up in 2018. We went down in 2019, and now we're back up, but we are only at the same level that we were at 2 years ago. Not great. FAR, B+, so they're still continuing to rise. To get an A, again, is 45% or higher, so they're inching closer. So if we want to actually look at these across from a comparison, let's take a look at that from at a glance here. I think you'll be surprised at some of the trends we might have found. So this is women's presidents from years 2018, 19, and 20, from those three reports. And from 2006, 2018, 16.9, down in year over year to 19, and then up again in 2020. Again, that report was just reported and published. So, and I'll provide the links for these as well. Women athletic directors is next, and basically what I said earlier, just showing it in a different way. 2020 is matching the 2-year height of 9.2. So no real growth here, right? No real growth. FAR, we've seen some tremendous increases here. Again, making some steps in the right directions. This is just a very interesting way to see and show the impact here. And that's like, if I was to graph these and on a plot graph, I want to put them on a timeline too, you'll be able to see, and I'll explain this here. And so the low man on the totem pole, as you can imagine, is the athletic director. The president's is the middle one, the blue one, and the FAR is the top one. And then the red line, you can't miss it, going down with all the 3 circles, and that's when the pledge was adopted. And you see there's not been really a whole lot of movement within leadership since the pledge. And that just kind of goes back to the weight of the pledge, and that there's no real sanctions that's keeping that accountable, keeping individual schools accountable for signing said pledge. We do obviously see some interesting trends in the FAR position, which again is fantastic. So what do we do with this? Let's take a look at some key discussions, and we're going to look at some takeaways that tie back to our purpose. Our first purpose was that to establish and understand that men still dominate the FBS Division I leadership positions, and I think the data really speaks for itself here. 2, gender hiring practices need to be improved. Again, I think the data helps support this. We all kind of bring this to light and see this. 3, we need to counter unconscious bias by being conscious about the biases. Number 4, include men in the solution. That sounds a little anti-productive, but it's I'll explain this in just a second and how that is actually a good play. Number 5, give high potential women earning high potential women, even those that earn a lot or just have a high potential in terms of skill set or education, equitable sponsorship, and I'll define what that is. 6, measure the gaps, then measure the results. Essentially, more studies need to be done. Again, we'll get into that. So let's take a look at the first 2 here. We know this goes back to the first takeaway, key takeaway, also back to the main purpose, and that is data speaks for itself here, that men do dominate this position, or these leadership positions. Again, the leadership position is presidents, FARs, and athletic directors. Okay, so the gender gap within the FBS Division I leadership position is as wide as the Grand Canyon, and we need to narrow that gap. Okay. Number 2, gender hiring practices have got to improve, guys. This is just poor, and so their poor consistent performance is highlighted by these tides. The tides report is really just unacceptable, and so reform intentionality need to occur on a daily basis. Number 3, counter unconscious bias by being conscious of biases. What does this mean? What if we were to make the pool of applicants wider and more diverse? How would we do that? Well, we could ask the recruiters at the schools, search committees, and those who are part of maybe the search committee lead to help out. We can also ask the leadership that overall that's going to be making the decision or even the final interview during these processes to specifically target non-traditional applicants that might not benefit from informal networks or mentors and connections. Oftentimes those formal networks or informal networks and mentors and connections are found tightly knit around men, and women just don't have these, sometimes don't have these sort of access. We need to ask them to remember to balance during these processes of looking at and recruiting, looking at the resumes and the applicant pools. Ask them to remember to balance the technical skills with other skills like language proficiency and cross-cultural awareness. And then we need to ask the question, what if we organized an unbiased, unconscious bias session for the recruiters, for the search committees, for even the leadership? If we were to organize and have them partake in this sort of unconscious bias session, I think you would see some pretty crazy results. And that would be, I think we would see a wide array of styles and work experiences. The idea here is behind all of this is to uncover and even just to also bring the conversation out into the open, because the more we pay attention to our personal or our potential biases, whether or not they're unconscious or conscious, the more we'll work to disrupt them, and the less likely we are to be able to be held back by them. So I think to counter unconscious bias by being conscious of biases and taking these sort of steps would be very helpful. All right, number 4, include men in the solution. To close the gender gap, focusing exclusively on women is the right way to go, right? Not necessarily, right? So when you broaden the conversation, this is what the value here, when you broaden the conversation to include men and women, it actually improves the opportunities for everyone. For example, let's just take one example, paternity leave. Men can be reluctant to use their benefits, such as, sick time, right? Or paid time off. This particularly to go take care of the family, right? The kids. Well, that holds back women by reinforcing the outdated idea that childcare should be mainly the women's responsibility. This is outdated idea that only suppresses the women's opportunities further. So childcare and paternity leave need to be reformed. Reform that puts focus on egalitarian relationships at home and work, to better the family and work-life balance, and to realize that this is not a zero-sum game, but a win-win situation. All right, so number 5, give high-potential women equitable sponsorship. Informal sponsorship occurs when someone showed you the ropes, right? An advocate, someone who backed you for promotion, so on. To help you get ahead. What if we change the informal to a formal practice? We call this equitable sponsorship. And what does this mean? Asking the potential sponsor to choose someone who may be from a different background, religion, race, gender, religious beliefs, all these things that might make us different. But these relationships are crucial because they ensure that sponsors are more than just advisors, but rather constant supporters. So what if we expected our leaders to go beyond giving advice and making sure that their high potential employees, no matter the gender, get the experience and visibility they need and deserve to advance in the organization? We can then make this something our leaders are evaluated on, right? This is now an evaluation piece. Number 6, measure the gaps, then measure the results. It's real simple. More published academic research in this area needs to be completed and conducted. Open studies to all in the NCAA on all levels. Quantitative studies that gain new perspectives on areas like hiring, retention, and promotion rates. Qualitative studies that gain new perspectives by asking questions like, what do you see the biggest obstacle to maximizing your potential? What is the value of those conversations and those types of studies? I think we need to ask those questions to get those answers. if we were to give you some concluding remarks here, I would say that gender equality is the interest of countries, is in the interest of countries. It's in the interest of organizations, it's in the interest of men, their children, and their parents. It is not a zero-sum game. That is, it's not a win-lose situation, but rather a win-win situation. It needs to be conducted this way. And I think to leave you with a quote, and the quote is from former First Lady Michelle Obama, and that is, no country can ever truly flourish if it stifles the potential of its women and deprives itself the contribution of half its citizens. Thank you.